I never expected a Tuesday morning to change everything. The sun was just spilling over the skyline, painting my apartment in shades of gold and pink, and I was sipping my black coffee, running my fingers over the silk blouse I had carefully chosen for today. Work had been relentless, but it felt good. Earned, deserved. I had built this life from nothing, or at least from everything my parents had told me I wasn't worth keeping. And then my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. My heart skipped, the coffee suddenly tasting bitter. I answered. "Is this Emily?" the voice asked, hesitant, almost trembling. I froze. 12 years. 12 years of silence, of living a life they assumed I would never have. I hadn't heard from my family since they sent me away when my sister was born. The voice continued, I think it's time we talk. About everything." I put the phone down for a moment, letting the weight of the words sink in. My apartment was quiet, the city humming softly below, but my mind was a storm. Hurt, curiosity, a faint, ironic smile curled on my lips. After all, they had believed I'd never amount to anything. Yet here I was, sitting in my corner office with a view that used to belong in someone else's dreams. And suddenly, I realized that today wasn't just any Tuesday. Today, my past had decided to call. I remember the day they told me I had to leave like it was yesterday. I was 14, standing in the middle of our small living room in Ohio, clutching the threadbare quilt my grandmother had made me. My parents' faces were calm, almost rehearsed, but their eyes held something colder, something I couldn't understand. "Emily, we think it's best for you to stay with Aunt Karen for a while," my mother said softly, but her voice didn't reach the part of my heart that was breaking. "With your sister coming, we need space. It's just temporary." Temporary. The word echoed in my ears like a cruel joke. I had been their firstborn, the one they said would always matter, the one they promised they would never forget. And now, I was being packed into a car with a suitcase, my hands trembling, my throat tight with unshed tears. My father didn't look back. My mother's lips pressed together, a mask of guilt that didn't touch her eyes. Aunt Karen tried to smile, to comfort me, but nothing could fill the void of being rejected by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. On the night before I left, my grandmother pressed a small, worn notebook into my hands. "Write your truth," she whispered. "The world may try to erase you, but your words can't lie. Remember who you are." I clutched it like a lifeline. That notebook became my secret companion, the vessel of my anger, my dreams, and my fear. It reminded me that I was more than their decisions, more than their absence. That night, I cried myself to sleep in a stranger's guest room, but I also promised myself something fierce. I would not disappear. And when I woke the next morning, suitcase in hand, I made the decision that would define the next 12 years of my life. I was leaving behind more than my home. I was leaving behind their version of me. And I would become someone they would never expect. Living with Aunt Karen was different. She was kind, but not wealthy, not powerful. She gave me a roof, but I had to work for every small comfort. I took odd jobs, babysitting, tutoring, even working at the local diner after school, anything that kept me afloat and gave me space to dream. Every night, I poured my heart into that worn notebook my grandmother had given me, scribbling plans, hopes, and angry letters to the parents who had abandoned me. It was in one of those late nights at the diner that I met Mrs. Thompson, a retired marketing executive who had stopped in for coffee. She noticed me sketching logos and writing ideas on napkins. "You've got a sharp mind, Emily," she said, her eyes warm but piercing. "Don't waste it working for tips. You have potential. I can help you." Her mentorship changed everything. She introduced me to books I had never seen, to concepts I had only dreamed of. I learned branding, finance, negotiation, things I hadn't imagined could shape my future. There were nights when I cried in my tiny rented room, frustrated at mistakes, at doors slammed in my face, at the loneliness that felt like a permanent shadow. But every setback became a lesson, every small victory a reason to keep going. My first big break came when I pitched a small project to a boutique marketing firm. They laughed at me at first, too young, too inexperienced. But I persisted. I refined my ideas, stayed late, and finally convinced them to give me a trial. When my campaign launched, it succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. That moment, small as it seemed, was everything. Over the next few years, I built more, my own clients, my own projects, quietly but steadily. I bought my first apartment in Chicago with the profits, decorated it modestly but thoughtfully, every detail a testament to my independence. I never posted on social media, never bragged to anyone back home. They didn't need to know I was thriving. I liked it that way. My life, my terms. And through it all, that notebook stayed with me. Filled now with sketches, contracts, dreams realized, and plans for the next steps, it reminded me daily of the little girl who had been sent away and the woman who refused to be erased. I had survived, and more than that, I had flourished. The knock on my office door was hesitant, almost timid. I looked up from the reports on my sleek glass desk and saw faces I hadn't expected to see in over a decade. My parents. My mother's eyes flickered with uncertainty, my father's jaw tight with something I couldn't quite name. They had assumed, no doubt, that I would be struggling somewhere, maybe even resentful, but powerless. The office was quiet, save for the subtle hum of the city outside. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, a testament to a life built brick by brick, late nights and sheer determination. Art I had collected over the years adorned the walls, each piece carefully chosen, each telling a story of growth and independence. My bookshelves carried more than knowledge. They carried reminders of my journey, my first client's contract, the little awards that no one had celebrated but me, the framed sketch from my grandmother's notebook. I rose from my chair, smoothing the silk of my blouse, feeling the weight of 12 years of hidden victories settle over me. They said nothing at first, just looked around as though expecting the walls themselves to speak the truth. I let them take it in, the office, the apartment above, the quiet confidence that filled the space. "Emily," my mother finally whispered, her voice small. We didn't realize." I smiled softly, the kind of smile that didn't need forgiveness or apology. "I don't think you realized that sending me away didn't make me disappear," I said. My voice carried calm, but beneath it lay years of unspoken anger, years of proving to myself that I could rise above their choices. I gestured to the city below. "I've built a company, a life, and a future that I'm proud of. I'm financially independent, yes. But more importantly, I'm whole. I'm not broken. And I've done it without your help." Their eyes widened, disbelief and shame mixing in an unspoken cocktail of emotions. My father's hand trembled slightly as he reached toward me, but I didn't step back. I let the silence linger, letting the truth settle into the corners of their minds, into the spaces where they had assumed power for so long. "I know this is hard to see," I continued, "but it's time you understand something. I am not the child you abandoned. I am not defined by your decisions. I am Emily, strong, capable, and unstoppable." And as they absorbed my words, their posture changed. The arrogance of the past dissolved into shock, then, slowly, into a tentative respect. For the first time in years, I felt the power shift. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I had grown into someone they could no longer ignore. Someone who had taken pain, rejection, and absence, and transformed it into triumph. I leaned back in my chair, letting the soft leather cradle me, and watched them carefully. The dynamic had changed. Finally, I had the upper hand. Not out of spite, but because years of struggle had taught me that boundaries are sacred, and respect must be earned. "I want to help," I said, my voice calm, steady. "But it's not unconditional. Not this time." Their expressions flickered between hope and apprehension. I continued, laying down the rules that would shape our future interactions. "To start, you need to acknowledge the past," I said. "Apologies matter, but only if they come with action. You can't just say sorry and expect the world to forgive old mistakes." My mother nodded slowly, tears welling, while my father shifted in his seat, tense and uneasy. "Second," I went on, "you each have to commit to your own growth. Mom, That means pursuing your art again, painting, writing, something that gives you joy beyond control. Dad, it means being present, not just in words, but in deeds. Actions speak louder than decades of neglect. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. And lastly, I added, any toxic patterns, the gossip, the criticism, the old ways of trying to manipulate, stop. I am no longer your child in need of molding. I am an equal, and our relationship will only thrive if respect guides it. They listened, really listened. And in that moment, I realized something profound. The power wasn't just mine because of my success. It was mine because I had learned to define my own terms. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was setting the foundation for healthier relationships, for boundaries that would protect me and nurture growth. I smiled softly, reaching for my grandmother's notebook that lay on my desk. Remember this, I said, tapping the worn cover. It's not just about surviving. It's about thriving, even when the people you expected to love you the most fail you. And now you get to witness it and perhaps even learn from it. There was a long silence, but this time it felt different. It felt like understanding, tentative but real. For the first time in 12 years, I wasn't pleading for attention. I wasn't chasing validation. I was standing in my own light, offering them a chance to step into it, if they chose to change. Weeks passed, and I began to notice small but meaningful changes. My mother spent mornings painting again, her brushstrokes lighter, freer, more vibrant than I had ever seen. My father showed up for dinners without expectation, asking questions, genuinely listening, sometimes sharing stories of his own mistakes. The shift wasn't overnight, but it was real. I often found myself smiling quietly in my office, looking out at the city that had witnessed my growth. The skyline, once just a backdrop to my work, now mirrored the journey I had traveled, steep climbs, moments of doubt, and the thrill of finally standing tall. That old notebook sat on my desk, worn at the edges, pages filled with my past and present. I ran my fingers over it, remembering my grandmother's words. The world may try to erase you, but your words can't lie. Remember who you are. I had survived abandonment. I had survived rejection. And I had transformed those wounds into a life I was proud of. My success wasn't just in the office or in the skyline outside. It was in the way I now navigated the world, calm, confident, and unapologetically myself. One evening, as I closed the door to my apartment, I glanced at the city lights twinkling below. I realized something powerful. I no longer carried anger as a burden. I carried lessons. I carried strength. I carried the knowledge that being sent away hadn't broken me. It had made me unstoppable. And in that quiet moment, I whispered to myself, as if speaking both to the past and the future. I am Emily. I am whole. I am free. And no one's choices will ever define me again. Bottom of form.